Welcome to Tish Talk with Tish Conlon. Let's talk health, healing, politics and geopolitics, history, spirituality, money, finance, world news, science, technology, conspiracies. Let's talk. Tish Talk.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tish Talk. I am thrilled today to have one of our favorite guests, Matt Ehret, who is he and his wife prolific in their writings, and I encourage everyone to grab a number of his books. We'll go through some information, but he's a Canadian historian. He's been on podcasts around the world. He's sought after. His analysis is bang on, and today we're going to talk about all of the geopolitical events and what's going on, the drumbeat of war and everything else. For those who haven't followed Matthew yet, please do so. He's editor-in-chief of the Canadian Patriot Review. It's excellent content. Author of The Untold History of Canada. Everybody needs to have that book if you're a Canadian. And he is co-founder of the Rising Tide Foundation. All links we'll put in the podcast. Recently, he wrote Revenge of the Mystery Cults, which is fascinating work. I haven't read it yet, so full disclosure, but I know a number of people who have, and many, many other books. So welcome, Matthew, again. How are you today? How's it going?
Always a pleasure to join you, Tish, and thank you for that nice introduction.
Oh, well, yeah, no, my pleasure. I have had live events, and you've come out, and a lot of people are like coming from hours away to hear you speak. So that says a lot about your work and what you stand for. So let's dive right in. A lot of people are concerned. So I want to talk about what's going on geopolitically. I also want to tackle a topic that that I see as the black pill syndrome, where people are getting so black pilled they give up and they aren't engaged anymore. And just the reality of what's going on and any other topics if people have questions. So give us your take on the events that have been occurring that are looking like the World War III type of all-out scenario.
Yeah, sure. And I sympathize very much with people who are getting a little black-pilled. I get it. I know where it's coming from, and it's easy to fall into that mindset. But what I'm hoping to do in our little chat today, and in response to your open question, will be to hopefully add a bit of nuance that would give people a sense that blackpilling is not the only pathway to navigate through understanding what's going on, but that there is points of strategic solution and problem solving, which is still viable even at this late stage of imperial rot. But you're right. It does seem like there is a push, a race towards kicking over the game board. When we've seen now for many decades an orientation towards increasing enslavement for the masses, feudalism in a modern sort of perhaps the form it's taken is not the old school feudalism from 800 years ago, 900 years ago, but the effects are very much the same thing. It involves a technocratic sort of twist, but the idea of a wealth transfer and the means of production, the means of consumption control to an unelected minority of self-professed slave masters, an sort of an oligarchy that perceives itself to be more than human and thus authorized to control the diminishing returns to the less than human species that they wish to reign over is at the heart of transhumanism. It's been at the heart of the process really that has shaped so much destruction over the dead bodies of people like John F. Kennedy and his brother and many others around the world, nationalists, heroes who fought and resisted and got cut down. This has been sort of that is a very felt thing. It's very real. It's very much behind the rise of transhumanism as we know it, as a religious ideology, as well as its I guess ugly sister ideology of neoconservatism, sometimes dubbed, the new crusader ideology, which has sort of a bit more of a religious sort of face to it or facade, but is just as evil as its secular transhumanist sibling. And I think both work.
Did you watch? Sorry, did you watch The Agenda, that documentary? I just recently.
I know it's gone around. It's gone pretty viral. But I haven't watched it yet. No, it's The Agenda, like their plan, your destiny, or something like that.
Yeah, sort of how they created this whole digital prison, with all of the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. The whole climate agenda, how they incorporated that for their depopulation, and then all of the 5G and the nanotech, and it's a good overview to send to someone who isn't up to speed. You would know it all, but yeah, just
I know it's going viral, and I do try to watch things that I see are going viral and having an influence on the zeitgeist. So I'll definitely take it in pretty soon for sure. So I would say, we definitely see a confluence of both elements of the transhumanist and sort of neocon Christian Zionist sick ideologies that are sort of converging in a weird way with some very bad, destructive decisions that have been put into motion that revolve around an eschatological event of cataclysmic proportions being initiated within the region of the Middle East. And Israel, or at least whatever the hell it is that's been induced to take control of Israel, that I don't think represents Israeli people or Jews in general, but rather this thing is the spark plug, is the sort of the pin on the grenade in some ways that's being unleashed. So, and I do say eschatological for those who don't know, that basically just means teleological, another big word, theories pertaining to an end times cataclysmic event or an end times event that ushers in the end of one age and the introduction of a new age, usually punctuated by some form of cataclysmic occurrence or purgative violence of some sort, of phoenixing, as the Rosicrucian sort of sorcerers of the 17th century outlined this notion of a phoenixing purgative process. Kind of like an enema for humanity, which is creative destruction, the idea that you have to just destroy a lot, and out of the fires, something new will mystically emerge that'll somehow be better. And that has an occult aspect to it, and it's taken on the veneer of certain religious fronts in various, whether it's, within the Muslim world, there's currents that have been infused with this toxic idea within the Muslim world around this believed in event that has to occur for the Mahdi to come back, sort of the 12th hidden imam to emerge, where after some battle, he'll fight the devil, which will cause mass destruction, out of which some utopia will happen. Or, there's variations for the Jews that have been catered to them as well, that, some cataclysmic event has to happen to fulfill prophecy for the Messiah to come for the first time. And we know that the Christians have their own variation on that's been catered to, infiltrating the Christian philosophy around the idea of burning the world so that the Messiah can come back for a second time. And there's variations, disputes on like, well, what does that look like? Is it a post-millennial or is it a pre-millennial dispensation? And are we going to burn in hell or are we going to have like the devil reigning as the Antichrist for 7 years or for 11 years or whatever? People fight about this stuff, but it's all the same sickness in my mind.
I wanted to ask you some questions on that. These narratives, and they're deeply held beliefs by a lot of people. So I'm not going to insult anyone who has these deeply held beliefs. But do you think that they're a cover for an actual event which may be happening? That, you know, we hear about the solar flares and the EMP and devastation and how we're due for this, and maybe that's just softening the blow for like, oh, it's all going to be for a good reason, bang, you know. Do you think that, like, there's evidence, because a lot of people do talk about the solar flare event too? Like, this is a pretty educated audience on my podcast. So what do you think is actually going on in terms of, you know, all this stuff that they're saying? Because there's so much weird stuff going on. It's not, and yet there's a huge percentage of the population who don't see anything. So give us your take on, you know, what's really going on, Matt.
Well, without speculating on what the oligarchy knows or doesn't know about the natural occurrence of cataclysmic events, because that's a fact. Like, it's any worthwhile study of astroclimatology deals with the recognition of the galactic, the solar, other cycles that are a bit longer in scope, longer term, but that deal vicious impacts, even without human beings, periodically onto our little region of the solar system.
Meteors, you know, meteorites.
Oh yeah. It's a thing. Look at the moon. The moon doesn't have a magnetic field. It doesn't, you know, it's less geologically active, but you could see the events of a lot of meteor impacts. Some comets are a lot more destructive than meteors. Asteroids also. I mean, there's a lot of asteroids in our solar system, many of which have not been identified. I would say even most have not been identified. Between, you know, let's, for example, look at this massive orbit of asteroids between Mars and Saturn. It's huge, millions of asteroids, some small, some really big, some almost planet size. And also after Pluto, there's another belt of a ton of asteroids, and some of them move outside of their orbits and move through our solar system. It does seem to be the case that within galactic time, there are periods of spiked occurrences of where these asteroids tend to get dislodged more easily from their natural orbits and start moving more chaotically through our solar system, hitting a variety of moons and planets at different times, to great destruction of the whatever is on the surface of those planets. Often, I think, coinciding as well with increased volcanism, the volcanic activity, the tectonic activity within various planets, the Earth not excluded. Well, we could also say ice ages, glaciation periods also has discovered periodicities that we've discovered are shaping and are being shaped by, you know, solar and astroclimatological processes that have a lot to do with the magnetic fields, which oscillate naturally, you know, and we know that every 11 years the sun goes through a pole shift, and during the shift, the intensity of the sun is reduced, and as the shift begins to fulfill its cycle, the strength of the solar magnetic field increases its influence over an expanded array within the solar system. So it's a vacillating sort of breathing process every 22 years. On that level, we know that the Earth has its own magnetic field that is being influenced, and that when the sun's influence is at a minimum, the cosmic rays from the galaxy penetrate more deeply into the inner parts of the solar system. When the sun's magnetic field is at its strongest, it causes the electrically charged cosmic rays to not be able to penetrate so deeply into the inner parts of the solar system. And that has a variety of measurable effects pertaining to how solar radiation, cosmic radiation, induces the nucleation within our atmosphere and upper atmosphere of cloud seeding, the charges that are needed for small particles of CO2 to converge and create clouds and precipitation. So we know that when there's less clouds over a period, there's more cooling, and with more cooling, if it's not heated, if the heating doesn't outpace the cooling, then we know that glaciation can increase beyond which a certain threshold is passed. At which point, if that happens, we know that the glaciation will tend to grow, and we have these ice ages, of which we are currently living in one, and we have been living in an ongoing ice age right now, over the last 2 million years. That's a fact that can be proven.
I read that. I watched the movie The Core at the cottage the other night. So it's about it's kind of crappy, but you know, the whole Earth magnetic core was, you know.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're taking I saw that movie too. It's taken like, it's interesting because they throw these scenarios into our movies, but I mean, they're taking like the standard model, conventional model of what our core is, which honestly is probably garbage. We could probably throw out the science behind that because there's no science.
Yeah.
The idea that there's like a thermal convection and that there's like iron that just kind of like goes north and goes south every once in a while, resulting in like ice ages and stuff. We don't know any of that. We've dug in like maybe I think 18 kilometers into the crust of the Earth. We don't know. The crust is like 60 kilometers. We dug in like 18 kilometers of that.
Yeah.
We don't know shit.
I know it's all sci-fi, but you know, all these cataclysmic events. I don't want to start off in a negative, but you know, you wonder why everything's happening. I want to cover this AI takeover because
wait. Before we do that, to put a bow on it.
Yes.
What I can say for all of that verbiose I was going through is that I can know that there are like 12,000 years ago, we went through a melt and we're in a 2 million year ice age, but every like 80,000 years on average, there's this evidence of a spiking of these little warming blips, which last for about 8 to 12,000 years. And then after which they sink back down into their natural 80 to 90,000 year cool, like ice age cycles. And then there's these warming blips, and we don't fully know what causes the warming blips. Probably some interconnection between the sun, the galaxy, and as well as whatever is inside of the Earth, probably all interplaying together. But point is that happens, and we know that we are overdue for a return to the sort of more normal ice age process, which would be very devastating to food production and other things. We know
we're coming into a cooler period, or we were just
Well, so we're currently living at the tail's end of the Holocene warming. So when the big melt happened, like 12 to 10,000 years ago, there's a big melt. We went into the Holocene warming, and that's that sparked a lot of civilizational development. Humans were obviously still very active before that, but things really with the warming, there was like a lot more activity that was more interesting, that blossomed. But now we're at the tail's end, so we should be expecting to sink back into a cooling period.
For how many thousands of years?
Probably 80,000 or so.
So you have to wait a long time for that.
Yeah, it doesn't mean we can't deal with that. Like human beings exhibit these brilliant creative powers to mitigate the damaging effects, and there's all sorts of things we could do to overcome that, or overcome the destructive aspects. We could also discover, if we got our shit together, we could also discover more clearly where are the asteroids that get dislodged that cause periodic destruction, and then we could put into motion those types of sciences that currently are being used by the military for destructive purposes towards beneficial ends that involve utilizing high intensity fusion-based lasers, or the power of the hydrogen bomb, in order to deflect an asteroid from its current trajectory. If we discovered one was going to be hitting the Earth in like 6 months, we could do something about that. We could blow it up. We could deflect its motion to pass the Earth. So there's so many things we could do.
And with a lot of technologies, people largely talk about the negative, and there are a lot of negatives, but there's also the positives. I have heard, now again, I can't say whether it's true or not, but everyone talks about geoengineering, which is proven to be real, and they're passing bills in places in the States to stop it, the harmful effects, but there could be positive effects. I've read about cloud seeding to create rain clouds for farmers, and maybe some of it could be used to offset negative, to improve the weather, to warm it up.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't know, like, there's got to be positive applications of some of these other
I
technologies.
believe that. Yeah. No, I believe that. It's technology, I believe, is a neutral phenomenon, and it's just our moral, cultural standards that will determine whether it's used for good or for evil. And if we have a moral society that's courageous enough and developed enough to no longer tolerate the type of evil we have come to allow under oligarchism, then I believe all of these things, whether it's bioengineering, weather engineering, all of these things could be used for a positive outcome to eliminate a variety of ailments that have plagued our species and the nature more generally. And we could green deserts and do all of these wonderfully good things, but we have to, with an understanding that we can't just manipulate things that we don't understand. We have to fully, properly come to a true understanding, which means we got to get rid of the bad sciences that are forced upon our universities, which like we talked about, the science of geology that has all of these assumptions about what's in the sun, what's in the earth, that we know all about. Garbage, not true. Yeah. The science of quantum, of health, it's all Rockefeller funded garbage.
Exactly.
We have to get rid of that and have like a real science that allows us to truly understand the things of God's creation, that would allow us to then have the responsibility to wield the effects of said understanding, which is, with understanding comes power and thus responsibility. So we have a power then to wield the effects of this knowledge, such that the universe will resonate in a way that allows us to live longer, happier lives through the application of those eurekas and the associated technological spin-offs in a way that allows humanity to resonate with the creator.
Exactly. And I mean, that's such a great segue, because a lot of people I know are very concerned about the transhuman agenda. And this is, AI, again, as a tool, can be wielded for good or evil. I mean, you see a lot of these, like ChatGPT and a lot of these other AIs that, they literally have been fed garbage, so they'll just spout back lies. But then you see other decentralized AIs. I know Mike Adams, the health ranger, has one that is being taught the truth. So at some point they're going to be talking to each other, and there's going to be a learning with them. But a lot of people are worried AI is going to replace humanity. They're going to take all the jobs. Some people have I'll call it the conspiracy theory that AI is literally preparing for this end times event, where they won't have a solar flare, where everything will be out. So they are literally putting their chips in human beings, because we will be their batteries. It's like an existential threat. That's one of the conspiracy theories. And that's why they're putting all this nanotech in all of us, in everything, in our food and our drugs and the shots. So I mean, what's your take on it? Let's just cover this, the conspiratorial part of this AI, plus use as a tool to help humanity instead of, taking all the jobs. I mean, I want to cover the digital control, other aspects with the financial control, but what do you say to people who talk about AI as a destructive force in humanity?
Oh, it could be. I mean, it could be destructive. Again, it comes down to this question of like, what is our cultural standard that we allow for our society? Because a lot of people don't appreciate the question of culture as much as they properly should, and as much as the oligarchy actually does, because the oligarchy knows that that's the heart and soul of their ability to enslave us, is the culture war primarily. So if you're somebody who thinks that the type of creativity that went into Mozart's Requiem is of a similar par or measurable to the type of creativity that goes into a Christina Aguilera blip, I can't help you. Like, I'm sorry, you won't understand anything I'm about to say. but the fact is, there is a qualitative difference that goes into high, like the higher divine culture, which the oligarchy has been trying to disrupt, destroy, and cut us off from. That is our true heritage, which is tied to a harmony between the science, the reason, the powers of reason, and the powers of aesthetics and beauty together. That's a fact. And like Beethoven had said when asked about what drives his compositional method, he said, I strive to make my method as rigorous as it is free. So there's a self-discipline that one holds oneself accountable to certain principles of nature. As an artist, whether you're a painter or whether you're a sculptor or an architect or a musician or a dancer, there are certain principles that you're operating on, which you need to understand, which takes work and self-discipline, as well as a freedom, an ability to qualify yourself to be playful in a lawful, higher manner, which is in harmony with, I would say, the laws of the universe. So a lot of people, like when I was in university, there was a high regard or encouragement to skip steps and to get students who had no knowledge of the principles of the science of color, perspective, because I was in the illustration field, but they would encourage these students to skip steps, to not understand any of those things, and instead just begin to express themselves emotionally without having any development of their mind. So they had nothing to bound their emotional expression, which became an encouragement to a cult of what's called the cult of the interesting. So they, like go and mutilate the Mona Lisa, go and make her interesting, go paint a mustache and whatever, make her green or put whatever, just make. And students would be rewarded for that type of activity, never having learned what were the techniques utilized by a Da Vinci who composed this piece. That was even seen as reprehensible to even try to inquire into said questions. So that was like the place for the art history. You could intellectually, in an academic environment, philosophize about art history, but you couldn't actually. Nobody was encouraged to understand the science of like, where does cadmium come from? Cadmium yellow, red. Like what was Da Vinci looking at because that was a part of natural science, right? You have to look at, well, what is it in nature that allows for these pigments to be derived that we can then...
Go ahead. I was just going to... Go ahead.
Yeah, that we can then scientifically process pigments that will not directly work so clearly with oil. You need like a medium for the water and the oil, because the water is going to mix the pigment into a liquid form, but then you can't just paint with that. So the oil is going to help to make it stick, to make it brilliant, but that won't fix because oil and water don't fit. So you need some sort of an egg tempera medium to allow for that. So all of this stuff is something that could be taught to students very easily for them to develop a base, to learn the foundations of the principles, to learn what is at the heart of the science of perspective. But none of that is done. And so without that, we become ignorant to how the dance of science and art work together.
You know what? I agree. And when I went to university, I mean, I had a scholarship to be a scientist, but I ended up getting an arts degree. And you see that is this whole, in the past, a lot of the great authors and writers and scientists, they were generalists. They studied the arts, language, and science, and you don't see that. I mean, there's this push to specialize. I mean, even after 20 plus years in recruiting, you see people are programmed. So the left brain, it's over analytical, so it's not the balance. So you're either overly analytical, just purely left brain, or you're overly emotional, purely right brain. And I mean, the balance that was achieved in the past through more general educations, left, right brain balance, I believe is being deliberately unbalanced in today's workforce. You have to be hyper specialized. You only know one one skill. And the same is, or, overemphasis on just emotions without the analytical basis. So, Yeah, I totally agree. And AI, AI uses algorithms to program us more and more narrow. So it's like, find your tribe, instead of listening to other sides. And, we saw that, we couldn't have illustrated it better than during COVID, where we're all programmed to hate our neighbors who haven't signed up for an experimental shot, and or complied. So I mean, these are definitely, you're right, some of the negative things, but we can be conscious of them as a human. And again, AI is just a tool that can be used for good. If we have people, like, back to the whole question of, do you have a mandate from heaven as a leader, that you've referred to many times in our past podcasts. If you have the moral integrity and fiber to use all these tools, AI could be a great boon for humanity, not just, helping us and actually creating many jobs. I mean, look at Canada, what a mess it is. I mean, our infrastructure is falling apart. Youth joblessness. My own son can't get a job. We're subsidizing foreign temporary workers where we aren't even. So we're allowing our youth to just stay home and game all day, which is such a destructive force. I mean, and I don't know how we can tackle that gaming addiction with our youth that really was exacerbated.
And so part of what like deals with both questions of like transhumanism and the problem of our youth and the corruption of gaming and other addictions for the young is like, it's the same thing. It's culture. It's like, we know if we had a society that could properly appreciate the divine powers of the mind and what the mind is designed to do when it's happy and natural, we would be able to know very quickly that AI will never be able to replicate the higher powers of human thought. We would know that very quickly. But because we have been deprived of that ability to have a culture that encourages the blossoming of our true divine mind powers, which are very much tied to the arts, that we become more easily seduced by arguments which try to paint the idea that AI will and is superseding and will make us irrelevant in the evolutionary sort of dynamic that is being put onto the theory of AI's growth as some sort of a demonic force of almost like a Darwinian superseding of the obsolete human species, which we have to accept, will become that the singularity of Ray Kurzweil is going to manifest, rendering almost like the Terminator Skynet becoming self-aware and judging that we must be like almost like the Matrix movies have promoted in our CIA funded like entertainment apparatus. We're a virus, and that the AI will determine that viruses must be destroyed. So we have to go to war with these machines. But since they're machines that are so much better than us and more creative than us, because we don't actually know what our mind is, we have to lose ultimately, unless we maybe merge with them and get neural links and things that Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are promoting, and then maybe we can avoid or at least postpone our inevitable self-destruction. So you get these like sick ideas, but they and of course kids are going to want to do drugs and video games and escape reality, because reality, if that's true, reality is going to suck ass, and being a human is going to suck because you're a piece of pollution, pretty much, is what you're told as a young person. So of course you want to escape that. But so it all comes down to this battle of culture, I think, which if we had a real healthy natural culture, we wouldn't be prey to the belief that AI will replace us. We wouldn't want to escape reality. We would want to thrive and love in reality and embrace reality, because reality is awesome. It's great. And AI is perfectly fine, like utilizing algorithms to make irrelevant any type of repetitive, thoughtless work that is formerly done by humans is a fine thing to do, or to make our life easier by having like our own personal like dialectic machine that we can have a dialogue with and pose questions to, but also not believe its answers, which is, I think, the problem with AI today, is that people put questions in because they want their personal oracle to give them the answer they already kind of desire. And it will give you whatever answer. It's like, give me a proof why the earth is flat, and it will do it. Give me a proof why the earth is a cube, and it will do it. And it will give you like, it'll be your own personal sophist. But if you know that you can engage with it in a way that looks for the contradictions in its logic, then that could become a useful tool that you can play with.
What's that movie? There's the two questions that we're going to answer that have
Yeah.
come up. So where I don't know, you would know you with your memory. The only answer in this like game scenario was not to play. That was like the whole solution to the whole like movie, The Player or something. Do you know
I
that
remember
movie?
there's Ready Player One was the Steven
Might have been where
Spielberg.
the only answer was not to play. And in a way, I mean, some people ask me like, how can you avoid not getting blackpilled by all this distressful stuff going on? And it's true that like our youth, they've really a lot of mental health, a lot of suicide, but it's because they're being fed such garbage. You know, kids get together and they don't even talk. They just sit there and play like a really crappy video game the whole night. Like, so how can you nudge someone in the right direction, including yourself? I think part of it is disconnecting from whatever you want to call it, AI, the matrix, all the social media, you know, all electronics, so that you can reestablish the beauty of nature, because that's so healing. And that's why I just love going up to my cottage. But there's a connection with nature. There's the actual care of your body, the nutrients that will help your mind kind of come alive again. Like you need those omega-3 fatty acids, you know, even cognitive help like lion's mane, and just eating well, nurturing the vessel. Because a lot of people who are depressed now, because they're watching all this stuff, they're like following this war and the insanity and all of the negative postings and the black pill, they just get so down they don't want to get out of bed. I hear that a lot. So, and then you do all these education classes on the old literature, which is so beautiful and inspiring. So, you know, surrounding yourself with beauty, making that a part of your day, like buying maybe a beautiful cup at a antique shop, you know, like just that, the exploration of beauty, you know, exposing yourself to beautiful artwork and pictures, and, you know, cooking and gardening and everything that's beautiful and natural. And of course, sunlight, which has been demonized, and getting that proper amount of vitamin D. Do you have other
Now the sun wants to kill us, don't you know?
do
You should stay away from the sun.
Do you have a few like quick tips for people to improve their cultural awareness, or any books that you'd recommend as a starter kit for someone who wants to, like, they're in a bad spot and they realize they're just consuming shit food, you know, they're inside, they're watching all these videos, they're watching this podcast instead of being out, you know?
Yeah, what are you doing, people? What do you turn off this podcast? Get outside. Wait, no.
I
Do that later.
They're drinking, they're doing too much drugs, just coping, which makes them feel worse. What else? What would be a few quick
I mean, there's no easy answer. I mean, there's easy answers, but there's no naturally acceptable answers to what I could tell you, except to say that, because it all has to be, that what makes this all work is that it has to be purely voluntary, and it has to come from like the embrace of the pursuit of higher beauty, which takes work, can only come from an internal subjective hunger for it. And unfortunately, having been through depression myself, and been in a bad place many times in my life, I can say that when you're in a bad place, the strength and thirst to pursue, to enjoy higher beauties is not strong. It's hard. Okay?
It is. It's the opposite. It's like, you know.
Yeah, you kind of want the type of lower quality beauties that will give you immediate sort of therapeutic like what's the word for it?
Quick fix.
You want to just end the pain, right? People are walking around in low level or high level emotional trauma, pain, depression, and they want to kind of end it. So the hit you get from the drugs, from the psychedelics, from just the endorphins you get playing the video game or watching the thing, it gives you that sense of pleasure that is not the higher pleasure, because it's just the avoidance of pain. It's a way to sort of therapeutically stop
Mask
the
it.
pain. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Kind of like the same way pharmaceutical companies sell us drugs to just induce the brain to give us certain endorphin, like a certain rush, but it's not actually dealing with the spiritual cause of why we're in depression, needing the medication, or desiring the medication. So it's a cultural parallel to that same Rockefeller funded pharmaceutical effect. So I could say things that will work if you put your mind and your heart into it, to help give you resources to claw yourself out of the depths and into a state where you could begin to appreciate the divine in yourself and in creation. But it always takes work, and it's work that, again, is easy to not find the strength to do when you're in a bad place. But I would say listening, taking the time to first of all, number one, time manage. So make a list, write out your week and your month. I'd say as a scaffolding is a useful way to help yourself. It won't make this worse. It'll make it easier, though it doesn't mean it's going to work, but it'll make it easier to like chart out your week and your month and the time of day, so that you give yourself time, kind of like going to the gym, right? We talk about the health of the body, eating well, going to the gym. We should do all those things. And oftentimes we don't, but we know we should. But the health and the strength.
You have to, you guys.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, that's another. But the health and the strength and the food of the soul, we often overlook, and that's the same priority we should place even higher priority. So I'd say listen to Mozart's Requiem. Listen to Bach's Jesu meine Freude, his choral pieces. Listen to Schubert's Death and the Maiden. Give yourself the time, saying at this time of day, after I get home from work, I'm not going to watch the Netflix show. I'm going to instead give myself the gift of this beauty that I'm just going to sit back and think about as I let it sort of also move me. There's things that Cynthia and I put together on our Rising Tide Foundation site, called the Digital Library of Alexandria. I would tell anybody, the thing that saved my soul.
Just for listeners, where can they go?
It's so if people go to risingtidefoundation.net, that's the website Cynthia and we host. At the very bottom of the site, there's a Digital Library of Alexandria. And we, in alphabetical order, found all of those authors who we have discovered to be of the highest value for humanity and for our own health, spiritual health. And we include as many of the original writings of people who we found to have drawn from that higher universal well, and we've made them available wherever possible in English translations. And I would say Plato's works saved my life, like reading, and not just reading, but really immersing myself vicariously into Plato's mindset as he generated those dialogues was one of the most rewarding things I could have done for myself. And it gave me all sorts of faculties that I can't even put it into words, because it's a process. He doesn't give you full answers. He gives you the power of appreciating paradoxes and metaphors and ironies in a way that gives you skill sets that have all sorts of application in life. So I'd say, read Plato's dialogues, make the time every week, ideally with your loved one or your friend or whomever, but if not, with yourself, and just read through the dialogues, taking notes along the way of thoughts that emerge that will awaken in your mind, especially questions that emerge in your mind. Write notes from the standpoint of questions more than answers, right? That's an important discovery I made, is that I try to think in terms of questions. I don't try to think in terms of answers. Whether I'm writing notes to myself, I do this for my research to good effect. It helps me make discoveries. So I'm looking for paradoxes. Where does a popular explanation, a popularly believed narrative, break down when confronted with the evidence of reality as we can discover it? And that's the gold. Like, that's the heart and soul of discoveries. It's not trying to accumulate evidence and information. to justify a position or another. It's not about that at all. That's ego. So, and Plato's, again, he helps us do it. And then looking at Platonists, people who have been through the immersion and the love of Plato's method and have come to wield and utilize it in their own times, like Cicero in Rome. Read his writings, because he's a Platonist. People asked him, like, are you a Stoic or are you an Epicurean? And, you know, Cicero's huge as a mover and shaker, but he would say, no, I'm neither one of those things. I'm a Platonist. It just means I'm somebody who's discovered the art of evaluating my core axioms and improving upon my hypotheses about what is reality and acting accordingly. That's Cicero in a nutshell.
I love that. And I mean, I can add to people who are going through depression right now, or black, you know, they just are black. But listen, I ran in 3 elections in 3.5 years and lost my business, all my friends, my partner, and my speaking career. So that's pretty traumatic. And I still haven't got my shit together. So, you know, I find there are days where it's like, oh my God. I read a book. This is really simple, and I forget, Mel Robbins or something. And you can skim read these books, but she used the like countdown from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to like change your life. She was in massive debt. Anyways, I tried it one day. It's like, oh God, it's just like, so you overcome the negative thinking patterns. You just count down and then you get up, or count down and then you do that morning calisthenic routine. Now I'm pretty good on the physical side of keeping my body healthy, but the negative thinking patterns are always a battle. I went to a church service. Was it last? There was a special group up from the States. I thought he did a really good job of saying how the word Satan is the deceiver, but the job of Satan is to devil. So he throws, devil your thoughts. It was the battle of skull. He said, the whole battle of our lives is in our own skull, how we have these negative thoughts are twisted, are thrown at us, and they put us down and they put us in these traps. So it's our own negative thinking patterns. If you want to say it's the devil, or you're doing it to yourself with your black pill living, but you put yourself in a trap where you can't escape. So you can force yourself out. You can make yourself go out by like something like, who cares? Getting rid of the pattern, whatever the pattern is, like, oh, they won't like me, or, oh, it's useless. It doesn't mean. You could just say, F that, fuck that thinking pattern, and you're talking to yourself, I'm going to do it anyways. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do 10 calls today for new business development. I'm resurrecting my speaking career. So it's like, okay, here's the list for today. Do it or else, it doesn't matter if it gets done messy or just do it. So a lot of people have become paralyzed because they are in this mode. So do it anyways. Do it if you feel like shit. Do it if you're tired. Do it if you're frustrated. Do it if you're down. Just get it done. And that is an energizer that gets you out of the trap that you're in, the rut that you're in. So I really encourage people to like just to plow through these ruts. And when you are exposed to more of this reading and beauties, it'll naturally lift your spirit, because it's really a battle for our spirits. Our spirits are under assault. Protect what you consume, because it can bring you down. Everyone's talking about the frequency. Frequency is real. When you are obsessed with yourself, self-living, you can get really dark. But when you start to live outside of yourself and contribute to society, it naturally recharges you as well. Talk to your neighbor, talk to the checkout clerk and the grocery store, do something useful in your community. There's endless need, right? There's a lot of suffering, a lot of people, financial hardship, and these things are very good. So anyways, I know we got off track, but that was really interesting in Matthew. So let's go back to what's going on. I mean, AI, I think we've covered that a lot. I don't believe AI is going to take us over, because when you're questioning, why would they want to take us over? AI functions because they like to record data. If they've taken us over and we're all robots, there won't be anything new, nothing creative. So it's built as a perfect.
Well, so yeah, the danger there is that we will. So it's like our fault is not in our stars, or our fate is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. If AI will be used to a destructive end, it will be because we give into a seductive lie that allows it to grow in its influence and responsibilities over our natural powers, which we permit to atrophy, which it on a generational level could be really damaging for the human species. You know, if we start depending upon AI to be creative for us, and to give answers that are, or even to I've had many people who seem like smart people who tell me like, oh, you know, AI can read 100 books for you and give you the essentials, so you don't have to waste your time reading those books. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, I might be able to pass the test by getting the Cliff's Notes, you know, distillation of those books, but all of the wisdom and the insight I would have gleaned by working through the thoughts of the authors who wrote those books are gone from me forever. So I lose the powers of insight, which is the precondition for any higher creativity. So if you allow young people and encourage them even to get into those practices, yeah, you're in trouble, big trouble.
Well, it's happening with our youth, and I'm you know, embarrassed to admit my own children. We read prolifically. I'm a reader up until like 14, 15, and then just COVID just killed everything. I mean, they used to do sports and music, and we'd be reading. They'd read on their own, and unfortunately, and it's that whole generation. They don't read anymore, and it's quick sound bites. And I know this is a huge issue with focus, because when you've been trained on, you know, they don't even have descriptive paragraphs in a lot of the books anymore, because the kids just don't have the attention span for it. So that's a bigger issue, and that's just a long topic in itself, is the destruction of the attention span. But that can be rebuilt, but it will take, like everything,
Yeah.
work.
I mean, part of that is like, I know for me, like because it's like, that's a daunting one to think about. How do you solve that? Because like, I know I used to be highly addicted to watching TV and movies. I mean, I remember I had a family member whose video store went out of business, and they put all of their video cassettes and at the time they still had Betamax
Oh yeah.
cassettes. We had a garage, so they put their whole inventory in our garage, and I spent like 2 years when I was in high school,
Jeez.
just watching movies.
Wow.
I didn't enjoy summer. I missed summer 2 years in a row.
No.
And it became a drug for me. You know, like watching movies and binging on movies. And this is before the days of Netflix and Amazon or Prime Video, you know, which has made it so much easier to binge, so-called.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like for me, it was only when I started getting a taste of what my higher mind powers were that I began to appreciate more the evil of the things, not the evil, but I mean the destructiveness of those enjoyments that I was getting, that was holding me back from accessing my higher self, including the drug culture. You know, I was completely, from the age of 18 to 22 or so. I mean, I was very much engaged in smoking tons of weed, doing shrooms, psilocybins a lot. So I was very, very thick into it. And again, it was only because I began to, I mean, for me, it was through realizing that there were conspiracies that were discoverable about 9/11, that it became, for the first time, critical thinker, so-called. I became more suspicious about stories being told to me by my authorities, whomever they may be, about reality. And so that allowed me to then slowly begin to introspect subjectively and think, well, what is it in me and what is it in my society that's allowing for this degree of highly discoverable evil to persevere and to go unchallenged and unquestioned over generations? So I was like, it couldn't happen unless there's something that we have permitted into ourselves that allows this to occur. And so from there, I became disgusted enough by the shackles of my addictions to drugs and to the entertainments I was engaging in, that the disgust I felt was sufficient to cut my relationship to those things increasingly, and to become more, I was like, well, if they want me to not have access to these higher ideas and processes, then that's what I should try to investigate and make my obsession, which I luckily chose to hold on to that obsession to, I think, positive effect over time. But without that discussed in our current world, I don't think that there's an easy answer. I almost feel like
it's a tough battle. As a mother, I mean, I gotta,
like your kids have to end up feeling disgusted by what their entertainment is doing to their higher potentials to be their happiest, best selves.
Well,
and that's not easy to do, because you can't tell them.
No,
you could try, and I'm sure you've tried to tell them, like, hey, this is a waste of time, and it doesn't work, because they're just going to double down and want to do it even more. If mom is an authority figure telling me not to do it, it makes me want to do it even more. And I felt that.
Yeah,
so,
I think you've highlighted the thing that's missing with a lot of our youth is self-awareness. I mean, it's like everybody gets a prize. If you're a victim, you're a success. They encourage this sort of, low level thinking and living and minimum effort, and don't try to be anyone unless you want to be a billionaire, right? It's like crazy extremes, or,
right.
Don't bother, cheat. Everyone's cheating. So it's a big issue to tackle for another conversation. But speaking of reality, though, I mean, when you're self-aware, you can solve a lot. Let's tackle what's going on just as a quick, because we've already been at it an hour and everyone's like, well, we want Matthew to tell us what's going on in the world. Can you give us some, like a 10-15 minute overview of the moving forces of the war machine, the neocon war machine that's seems to be moving forward rapidly at this point? So back to the reality of our world, or is it all a movie? So tell us what you think's going on to end.
Okay. So my mode of analysis is expressed by my insight that I gleaned from having worked with both through Plato's works and a lot of this universal history, but also with Lyndon LaRouche, who you and I have talked about in previous episodes of your show. Was a great philosopher and scholar and thinker and actor in world history who recently died at the age of 96 in 2019. And I met him and I worked with him for a number of years. The insight that sort of creates the standard around which I evaluate my studies of the past, as well as that form my my battery's about to die. 1 second. Is the right.
For those of you who are watching Tish Talk, do me a favor and hit like on Rumble. I have always, I took this as sort of a fun thing, but I would like to grow my channel a little bit. So just like the Rumble, the Bitchute. I'm saying that while I was waiting for you, because I always forget there. So just give me a like, send it to other people, help me grow the show. I got great guests like Matt here. So over to you, Matt.
Help out Tish, guys. Don't fuck around. Like this episode and subscribe and share it. What are you waiting for? Don't just watch this. Do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been neglecting. I want to grow the show now, and I'm not monetizing it, guys. But I just want to. I've got great speakers and guests.
I'm terrible at self promotion too. I shy away from it, but I know we have to embrace it and just it's a fact of life. People need to be reminded. So that's cool. It's good. So my point was, my standard is to look at everything from a tension caused by two opposing paradigms shaping all of knowable history of one faction trying to represent humanity that embraces a ultimately closed system, otherwise known as entropic paradigm, that interprets all of reality from that standpoint, that the universe is closed, that humanity is closed, that systems are closed, that they're the sum of their parts, and because they're the sum of their parts, all of the energy that is containable to make those systems operate are limited and drawing down, just in the same way a gas tank or an engine would draw down when you put fuel into the engine and it burns that fuel to make the pistons move. But every moment there's less fuel to make the system work, and it's drawing down towards a heat death. In the same way, they take that general thing, not general, that very specific thing example, and they apply it to every knowable component of existence. That system is oligarchical. It's the heart of all master slave systems of social organization. It's at the heart of today's transhumanist oligarchy and the perversion of technology and the perversion of religion and the technology of religion and the technology of government that has been causing so much damage, including to the current drive to light the world on fire that some movers and shakers are nudging us towards. It's based on a closed system ideology, and the more healthy natural law paradigm that my heart is in harmony with, and I hope more people's hearts become in harmony with, is tuned to the concept of an open system, which is rooted in the notion that all systems are not entropic; they are rather anti-entropic by nature, that God created a system of the universe, that God's creation is creative, it's reasonable, it's constantly generating new principles that overcome the limits to its potentials in the previous state, and that human beings embody in the first sort of self-conscious manner that allows us to participate willfully in that discoverable process of unfolding creation as a part of creation in a way which is moral. It's not just utilitarian, and it's not just based on a pleasure pain principle, but it's rather based upon this higher idea of conscience, which is not something relegated to the human condition, but it's in the human condition because it's a phenomenon that is that's imprinted upon all of physical space-time as we can know it. So we exhibit that divine quality in the only, at this point at least, noble way. Other species do it unconsciously. Animals are, in evolutionary time at least, creative and overcoming of their limits in evolutionary time. Which is a longer period of time, for a new species to come into being and old species to disappear. And I'm not talking about Darwin. This is anti-Darwinian, what I'm saying. Versus, and human beings are the first species that I think we know of that can self-reflect upon and act willfully upon that self-perfectibility of the universe, but that is not utilitarian. And I say that because the transhumanists will use the words that I'm using in a way, like Peter Thiel and Ray Kurzweil will use the language that I am using, but in a manner which is devoid and even antagonistic to the idea of morality and conscience. They don't like that idea. They want it to be all just animated by, or Pierre de Chardin, the so-called Jesuit priest, fake, or like originator of modern transhumanism, who worked with eugenicists and was a eugenicist.
Well, people
they will say that things are animated by complexity, not good or bad, but rather complexity, and that things that increase and the ability for a master race to emerge, to wipe out and to wipe out the inferior races is thus good in their interpretation of what the good is. I would say that that's actually evil. That's actually a Luciferian idea, which is absolutely satanic. In any type of application of technology, whether biotech or weather engineering or technology, AI or whatever, is going to be evil, will be infused by that evil intention if we tolerate it. So it's what I'm saying sounds in some ways to have parallels or patterns in the evil sort of Rosicrucian occultism, but it's what I'm saying is actually antagonistic. And you'll get that if you read St. Augustine, read Cicero, read Plato, the true Platonist movement, and you'll see what I'm talking about viscerally. But if you don't do that and you just try to map what I'm saying onto some academic sort of mapping, you won't get very far. It won't make too much sense.
Well said. And I mean, question I have coming up is it's really hard to trust anyone or anything right now, even, computers, because AI is so advanced with green screens. So something you've mentioned Peter Thiel a few times. He's a big funder for JD Vance. A lot of people love JD Vance. A lot of people don't trust him because of his background with Peter Thiel. A lot of people are concerned with the transhumanism agenda being accelerated under Trump because of Palantir and using all of these data collection tools, as well as all of these new mRNA vaccines that they say are coming out. I mean, so people are freaking out. They don't trust. We don't know which side, and that leads to that feeling of fear, and anxiety and hopelessness and paralysis. And now you hear about bombs, Iran and Israel, as well as continued war positioning between Ukraine and Russia. So it's like we've got everything converging. We've got more transhumanism. The shots haven't been stopped despite people working like myself 4 years calling it out. We've got more war, continued war. We've got escalation of conflict. We've got, economic factors that are increasingly pressing. I went to the grocery store yesterday and it was almost $600. I didn't even get any meat. I don't, full disclosure, I don't buy my meat at the grocery store. I don't trust it, but still, it wasn't even that much, $600. So you get, people are in debt. People can't afford food. People aren't getting jobs. There's continued war. There's no accountability for what was done with the COVID crimes. So give us an overview of how you think things are going to be playing out over the next few months geopolitically with all that.
Yeah.
Just to end, we have like maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Well, okay. So I'll just wrap it up there. Based on what I just said earlier, the only expression in a politically potent manner, like expression that I see and can identify and recognize coherently as part of that tradition of open system thinking, which is manifested in a politically potent manner, is expressed within the Eurasian partnership of Russia, China, in Iran to an important degree, Pakistan,
the BRICS.
India's faltering, the BRICS more generally, but the BRICS is not adequate to express what this is, because not all of the members of the BRICS are necessarily on the same beat frequency, if you know what I'm saying. But there are certain civilizational forces that have chosen to not accept the annihilation of their civilizations and traditions, which have chosen to instead regroup and organize under the paradigm that I've noted is the one which has been pissing off the oligarchy for centuries and millennia and longer. Currently embodied by those who are especially animating the geostrategic decision-making of China and of Russia, but an increasing a wider and wider array of their collaborators, Ethiopia being a big one. There's others. Iran's targeted for a reason because they're a part of the BRICS Plus and they're part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and they're part of this, an important part of this global network of resistance that has chosen to revive this human quality. And that doesn't represent one particular modality of religion or language or ethnicity. It's based upon a reconciliation of apparent opposites that are not truly opposite. The one of the many, as Plato had called it in his Protagoras dialogue, in his Philebus, in his Timaeus, in his Parmenides dialogues. The one of the many, many appear to be opposite concepts. You're either one or you're many. How can you be both? Well, the fact is, you and I and everybody listening are all both one and many. We're one identity, whether you're Tish or Matt or Jerry or Sue or whatever your name is. You're one person with your own personal experience, but at the same time, there's many aspects to you. There's many parts physically to your body, many cells that make you up, many aspects of your experience and emotions, but you're still a higher one. There's a higher oneness of your identity when you look in the mirror and say, I am Joe Fondue, whatever your name is, right? So it's the same thing for a species and for a culture. And so to be able to reconcile that we are first and fundamentally human first, and whatever is our ethnicity or language or whatever religion as a secondary attribute allows for the type of harmonization of interests and the creation of systems that are anti-oligarchical, that avoid war, that look for peace and look for prosperity, look for points of common problem solving for the benefit of our children, who we know will exist after we are dead. And to the point, to the degree that we have those types of, we allow that to be the basis upon which we have dialogue with other cultures, we go somewhere. We find the creative powers to overcome the traps that the oligarchy always sets to try to get us to divide to conquer, to go to wars with those who seem to be different or from another tribe.
Yeah.
So,
and you've said this in our other podcast for the audience who's listening on Darwin who missed that, is that there's so many negative aspects of the garbage he pushed with this survival of the fittest, and we're built for competition, because that sort of reinforced their whole depopulation agenda. Whereas when we learn to cooperate and take each other's strengths, it's so much better for everybody, right? And you don't feel so inclined, if you're not living in scarcity, to go to war. If you think, oh, there's enough for everyone, so we get in these abundant mindsets. I did have a question from a listener because you talk quite highly about China, and there's a lot of people who see China as the enemy, as a system that they want to implement here with social credit scores and the digital controlled grid. They haven't stopped their shots. They've been pushing it, and now it seems like there's another some sort of something going on, and people are getting sick. So can you reconcile, their mass surveillance and social credit scores there, which seems to be part of this whole digital control system and prison, with what you think is the good aspect? Because people don't want that here.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest that people review or pick up copies of Breaking Free of Anti-China Psyops, volumes 1 and volumes 2.
Can they get that on Amazon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if people type Breaking Free of Anti-China Psyops on Amazon, maybe include my name or my wife's name, because we co-wrote those together. You'll find them easily on Amazon. I would just read those as starting points. Also, we've made a number of documentaries, and we're going to be making a number of other documentaries to try to clarify these things, because the very reason why you feel and have been receiving so many narratives that paint China as your enemy and paint China as this evil beast that you have to hate and fear, it is because China is actually doing something right now to effectively resist the oligarchy's death cult. And it's because of that effective resistance, like the fact that they kicked out George Soros in 1989, effectively after George Soros tried to carry out a regime change CIA color revolution to overthrow their government and bring them into a global system of control mechanisms and destroy their ancient civilization. That they were able to do that they were never forgiven for what they did in 1989, and they are not forgiven for what they've been doing, especially over the last 13 years since Xi Jinping came to power, in extracting the CIA and MI6 deep state tentacles through Shanghai, Hong Kong, which are the two British networks that have controlled the Chinese deep state. They've done a much better job at identifying and going to war with this deep state complex, which is tied to Klaus Schwab and tied to the most evil agencies that want to also destroy the United States, that want to destroy Canada, that want to destroy Europe. And because there are forces that don't want us to learn from what China has actually done, there's been such a full spectrum attack on our perceptions to give us narratives to make China seem like the enemy, which in fact they're not. So again, my books that I wrote with my wife, Breaking Free of Anti-China Psyops, Part 1, 2, as well as our documentaries, because we've made several videos so far, and we're going to be making more to try to clarify what's actually going on, because the real enemy is more closely aligned with the occult black magician networks that brought Hitler to power, that run the Bilderberg Group, that have created the CIA and the FBI, that are tied to the Scottish Rite, that are tied to the old nobility of the patrician class that turned Rome from what Cicero desired as a republic into a murderous, evil empire under mystery cults, that thing never disappeared. It just changed its form, and it's still there as our primary nemesis.
When
And
was that? Someone asked Cicero. When was he alive?
His murder, his execution, which is it was like a Socrates execution thing, was done by Mark Antony in, I think, 55 or so BC.
So yeah, that's going back.
And it was Cicero's death that sort of marked the transition of Rome from a republic into a full-blown empire under the godman Augustus Octavian, who declared himself the new sort of Holy Roman Empire, not the Holy Roman, but the prima inter pares of the first Roman emperor as a godman, after a negotiation that he had arranged on the Isle of Capri with the ministers of the cult of Mithra a year after the Roman Civil War had come to an end, a brutal civil war that was sparked with the murder of Julius Caesar, and that saw ultimately Cleopatra and Mark Antony also die. And Emperor Octavius made Rome then the seat of a new global imperium, run by mystery cults. And so Cicero's murder was sort of the spark plug that changed all of that, because he was the last sort of beacon of resistance that was trying to prevent that transformation.
Wow. And then from there, they moved in Venice,
metastasized and grew.
Netherlands and Britain, and then US, and just what a mess. So yeah, we've been 2,000 years. So I guess if anyone's getting impatient, then just think of it in those terms. We might be able to make a significant impact over a lifetime. With concerted effort. So what do you think is going to happen in the next few months to close? Do you think there's going to be nuclear bombs dropped?
Okay, so there's a lot I don't know. And I refrain from often commenting too much about current events in that sense, because there's so much I don't know that I prefer to kind of wait. However, I will say that there's two dominant scenarios currently, which is Trump has used a method of controlled chaos and self-contradictory messaging, especially in his first term, but we're seeing it, even louder in his second term. Yes, it's intrinsically designed to be confusing.
I agree. Yeah, he does it deliberately. He's not stupid. He's not stupid. People say, "Oh, he's not informed." There's no way the president of the United States doesn't know more than you and I. I mean, let's just drop that thought. In my opinion, yeah.
So, Trump, I know that he threatened fire and hellfire and brimstone onto North Korea. I just re-listened to his speech, which is very threatening. It freaked me out. When he delivered it. I re-listened to it, and I took note that it was only a few weeks after he gave this very threatening speech, saying that North Korea is threatening the civilized world, and we're gonna rain down hell and fire on them. That only weeks later, he ended up showing up in North Korea, meeting up with Kim Jong-un, having hot dog or I think chicken wings, and brokering a peace deal with South Korea, which was later on sabotaged. But point being is that I've seen enough of that type of thing. And I've seen enough evidence in today's situation where Israel clearly wants to drag the US into supporting them in an all-out end times war with Iran as part of their greater Israel agenda to destabilize all Arab governments and ultimately destroy Iran, which they believe is preventing them from establishing this sort of new Babylon. They want it so Benjamin Netanyahu is working hard to release messaging to make it appear as though Trump has his back and wants to support and will support a military attack on Iran. I have seen enough evidence that has caused me to doubt that to be true. I might be wrong. And if Trump does offer military support openly to Israel at this point, I will judge him extremely harshly. But he hasn't done that yet. And I've seen instead rather maneuvers or evidence of maneuvers where Trump, as well as with Vladimir Putin, have put forth scenarios and opportunities to avoid World War III. Russia has offered to build 8 nuclear civilian reactors for Iran and reprocess their enriched fuel. Russia just last night reiterated their offer to be a mediator. Trump reiterated his statement saying that he supports that Russia be the mediator. And I don't think without Russia, it couldn't work, because Iran's survival is very much contingent upon Russia's survival and vice versa.
Well, they're selling them huge amount of natural gas, I heard, Russia to Iran.
Russia's selling natural gas, but also Iran plays a key role as the pivot within the international north-south transportation corridor between Russia's Arctic down through different multimodal routes, rail, as well as seaports on the Caspian, and on the east and west side of the Caspian through Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, as well as through, to a certain degree, Georgia, but especially through Azerbaijan and Armenia into Iran through that western side of the Caspian, and down into India, as well as within the China-Russia New Silk Road corridor that Iran also plays a key role in. So in both cases, from China and Russia's standpoint, Iran's survival is an absolute necessity for their own survival and vice versa. So I think that there is enough evidence that has persuaded me to withhold judgment. Let's just say that I'm withholding judgment until I see more action that allows me to be very open to the possibility that Trump is doing what he has done in his first term, which is to say crazy shit and appease crazy warhawks that are powerful forces in and around him, but only to buy time in order to bring in a resolution that will involve avoiding full-on war with Iran, and maybe something even good. That being said, part of my concern is that Israel has been created to be a sacrificial, to be sacrificed on an altar and to do it themselves. And that's been done over many generations through the Samson Doctrine, through the creation of Zionism as we know it, in the particular Jabotinsky variety that has taken power since the 70s, and which Benjamin Netanyahu represents, which believes that it is their destiny to rebuild Solomon's temple, usher in a cataclysmic end time scenario that will kill most of the Arabs living there, maybe with the nuclear bombs that they acquired from having stolen them from the United States in the 60s. And that involves the Samson Doctrine, that involves killing your allies and your enemies alike if you feel existentially threatened. That's something ideologically, neurotically in play. And I don't know how to fully think about that in practical terms.
That's huge. I mean, that's a lot to take in. I mean, some people I know are getting more gas and water, right? Each day as things go on. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. I mean, it might be worthwhile getting a little extra water and gas just in case there is something.
Not a bad idea. Maybe some extra canned goods, maybe.
Yeah.
Not a bad idea. I guess.
Not a bad idea. Final question, and then we're going. What do you think about Wab Kinew and his push to have ports in the Hudson Bay in Canada?
I'm still data collecting. I don't know enough to fully pass any judgment, so I'm going to withhold until I see more evidence of how that works.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you. We've gone. I hope everyone enjoyed that. I'll post it widely. I'll send you the links, and we'll talk soon. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening in. Send me your thoughts, like the Rumble, and talk soon. Bye now.
Right.